Gonzaga versus San Francisco for second place in the WCC and a double bye in the conference tournament. Folks, it all comes down to this.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Folks, Gonzaga is going to face San Francisco at the Chase Center Saturday night. The winner will earn second place in the WCC and a double bye in the WCC tournament in Las Vegas. We're going to talk about that, what San Francisco's been up to lately since Gonzaga faced them about 2 weeks ago, what the Zags need to do to win this basketball game, plus close out the show with an update on Gonzaga's matchup against Kentucky, which is now scheduled for the 2025-26 season. We'll talk about that, a little bit about the women's basketball team and the baseball team coming up this weekend as well. We start getting you ready for the final regular season game of the men's basketball season on Saturday night, March 1st, 8 p.m. Pacific time. The game will be on ESPN, which, folks, if you've been following ESPN basketball this year, if you've been following the length of basketball games, I wouldn't expect this game to start at 8 p.m. or even 8:05 or 8:10. Hopefully, this game will get started not too far off of that 8 o'clock tip time, but I wouldn't be surprised if we're ending up watching this game on ESPN News or ESPNU or somewhere else when it gets tipped off, just because of how often that has happened this season. Regardless, Gonzaga, San Francisco, Chase Center again. This is what happened last year. For those of you who recall, Gonzaga is not playing San Francisco at War Memorial on USF's campus, instead playing them at the Chase Center where the Golden State Warriors play. For the purposes of the net rankings, this still counts as a true road game for Gonzaga. It still counts as a true home game for San Francisco. So what that means is that instead of neutral site games, in order for it to count as a quad one game, the team would have to be in the top 50 of the net. And for a true road game for Gonzaga, that team only has to be in the top 75 for it to count as a quad one game. That's an important distinction, as San Francisco currently on Thursday afternoon, as I'm recording this, is 60th in the net, comfortably ahead of that 75 marker, meaning that this will be a quad one game for Gonzaga. But of course, they're not above that 50 marker. So if this was counted as a neutral site game, it would be a quad two game for Gonzaga. So while there's some frustration that Baylor, who's currently 31st in the net, that counts as a quad two win for Gonzaga. But this is kind of a little bit of karma coming back to Gonzaga in the sense of this being a quad one game, despite not being played on USF's campus. And I laid this out in the last episode after Gonzaga's win over Santa Clara, but it's very simple. There's not any weird seeding things we have to discuss, or like head-to-head matchups or anything like that. San Francisco beat Oregon State in Corvallis on Wednesday night. Had a game-winning three-pointer with about 8 seconds to go. It was a nice win. Veneman Abosi hit that game-winning three for San Francisco. But what that means is that both these teams are currently 13-4 in the WCC heading into the final regular season game of the season. You win, you finish second place behind St. Mary's. You lose, you finish third place. Both these teams will finish ahead of Santa Clara. So it is literally as simple as a battle for second place. Winner's second, loser's third. The difference between second place and third place is pretty significant in the WCC, arguably the most significant in all of the standings. Because if you finish second, you get that very valuable, coveted double bye where you do not play until Monday for the semifinals. And then if you win that game, you play Tuesday for the championship in Las Vegas at the Orleans Arena. If you finish third, you still get a bye, but you have to then play 3 games, 2 games to get to the championship, 3 games in that championship. Gonzaga hasn't had to do this. This would be a rarity for them. They would have to play, they'd have to get to Vegas earlier. They'd have to play another, it's just a whole different ball game. Whereas if Gonzaga wins this game, they finish second, which they've done before. They get to wait until Monday, play 1 game, and then play, presumably, likely, St. Mary's in that championship game. So this thing's for all the marbles. It's as simple as that. Like I said, San Francisco's 60th in the net currently. They're 1-4 in quad one games, which this will be for the Dons. 3-3 in quad two games, and then a perfect 18-0 in the quad 3 and 4, 6 of them being quad 3, 12 of them being quad 4. So like I said, comfortably a quad 1 opportunity for Gonzaga. Gonzaga would have to beat this team by like 200 points for them to fall from 60th to 75th. Frankly, I'm not sure there's any scenario where San Francisco falls below 75 with just one regular season game remaining and then two, maybe three conference games remaining. If they play three conference games in the tournament, there's no way that they're falling below 75. So this is a comfortable quad one win for the Zags, or a quad one opportunity, for the Zags. And as a reminder, Gonzaga beat San Francisco about 2 weeks ago on February 13th. In Spokane. 88-77 was the final in that one. I spoke with Coach Chris Gerlofson for San Francisco before that game, and one of the things he talked about was how dynamic and difficult it is to game plan against Ryan Nembhard because of his distribution skills and how he can beat you that way. And he kind of mentioned like, oh, he can also score. But I think you kind of tell watching that game that Gerlofson and San Francisco's strategy was make Ryan Nembhard beat us with his scoring, not with his facilitation skills. It's an effective strategy. Many teams have beaten Gonzaga this year in part by taking away Nembhard's ability to distribute the ball and forcing him to score. In this particular game, it didn't really work. Nembhard still had 13 assists, but he also had 18 points on 8 of 15 shooting. He was 2 of 4 from the three-point line. The main issue for San Francisco, we'll talk about it more in the second segment. This is not a big team. They do not have front court presence on this team. The injury to Nwedo Newberry back in, I think, December, maybe even late November, has just been really brutal for this team. They really needed him this year. Graham Ike last time out, 18 points, 13 boards, 8 of 14. Braden Huff had 12 off the bench. Michael Ajayi had 12 off the bench. The front court was dominant in this game and will need to be once again for Gonzaga to secure that victory at the Chase Center on Saturday night. The Zags also did a really good job against Marcus Williams last time out. He had 8 assists, but they were all in the first half, was completely shut down in the second half, finished with 9 points on 2 of 12 shooting. The Dons 3-0. Since the last time they played Gonzaga, they beat San Diego on the road, they beat Pacific at home, and then they beat Oregon State, like we said, in Corvallis on Wednesday night. That means the Dons 23-7 overall, again 13-4 in the WCC, same record as Gonzaga. They're 61st at KenPom, a better defensive team than an offensive team, although still top 100 in both categories. Adjusted defensive efficiency for San Francisco right now is 50th in the country at KenPom. Their offensive efficiency is 88th. And their tempo right in the middle, 166. Not a particularly fast-paced team. They'll get out and run when the opportunity presents itself, but they're not a team that really looks to get out and transition all that often. They've never really been like that, at least not in the Coach Gerlofson era. Well, we're going to talk more about what Gonzaga needs to do. Like we said, dominate in the paint. Dominate down low, crash the glass, gobble up the rebounds. If you're able to do that, you can leave the Bay Area with the W, secure second place in that coveted double bye in the WCC tournament. We're going to talk about that and more keys to a Zag victory coming up here in just a second. Attention Zag fans, the future of college sports is here and it is transparent. Before the Roy app, NIL negotiations often happen under the table, and fans, they just didn't have a clear way to directly support the student athletes that they love. Now with Roy, you get to be a part of the change and support your favorite Zag players in the most transparent way possible. Roy, the NIL app, allows you to choose the player you want to support, decide how much to contribute, and receive exclusive content from the athletes back. The best part, if your player transfers, you get your money back. It's a risk-free way to show your support. The Roy app is giving fans control. No more uncertainty. Now you can provide transparent, impactful support and help shape the team and the future of college sports with your contributions. So download the Roy app now from the App Store and start backing your favorite Gonzaga players the way they deserve, with transparency, trust, and a real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we are still getting folks ready for Gonzaga's final regular season game of the season against the Dons of San Francisco at the Chase Center on Saturday night at 8 p.m. on ESPN. We're going to talk our keys to a victory here for Gonzaga. And again, having already played this team, having already beaten this team, we know some of the things that are going to be important for Gonzaga to do in this game. And number one, punish this team on the block. Absolutely have to win this game down on the block on both sides of the ball. We'll talk about rebounding in a second, but this is not a good team in the interior. San Francisco had Jonathan Mobo last year. He's an NBA player, NBA center for the Toronto Raptors at this point after going the first pick of the second round of the NBA draft. They don't have a guy like that on this roster. Carlton Lingard is their replacement. He doesn't play the same way. He's skinny, he's tall, he's got some size, and he's an okay rebounder, but he's just not an imposing presence. Not that Mobo was super imposing. He was just very athletic for his size, and Lingard just not that. And they had Nwedo Newbury, who was more of a stretch four, but was a physical player who could kind of get down low and bang around a little bit. And he's been out with injury since, I think, early December, late November. And so this team just doesn't have enough size to deal with the team like Gonzaga. And in fact, I mentioned this a little bit in the first segment, but I'll say it again here. All four of Gonzaga's front court players scored in double figures last time out. EK had 18 points. He was 8 of 14. Braden Huff had 12 points on 5 of 7 shooting. He played 9 minutes. Michael Ajayi had 12 points on 5 of 8 shooting. Ben Gregg had 11 points on 4 of 5 shooting. Those four players combined had 53 points for Gonzaga on 22 of 34 shooting. That's 65%. 65% from the field from your four bigs combined. You do something like that again in this game, you have that level of efficiency. All four of your bigs are contributing in different ways. You're going to win this basketball game. Parsifala. You may remember that name. He's the big man for Oregon State. Had a good game against Gonzaga in Corvallis. Not as good of a game in Spokane. That was true for pretty much everybody at Oregon State. But Parsifala, decent big man. He had 24 points against this San Francisco team on Wednesday on 11 of 13 shooting. He just completely, he's a good big, good footwork around the rim. And Oregon State just force-fed him the basketball and let him go to work. And this San Francisco team couldn't stop him. And again, Parsifal is a good player. This is not trying to denigrate or disrespect him at all. But if he can put up that kind of line against San Francisco, there's no reason Graham Ike can't do what he did last time at least, which was 18 points. He can get 20, 25. And again, if it's not him, if he's having a rough night, go to Braden Huff, go to Michael Ajayi, go to Ben Gregg. Folks, go to Ismaila Diani. Why not? He was great in the 9 minutes that he played, or in the 18 minutes that he played against Santa Clara, on Tuesday night. I'm curious if we'll see him get some run in this game. My guess is no, or at least not a significant run. I don't think he's just going to immediately have replaced Braden Huff in the rotation necessarily, but I am curious if he's given an opportunity in this game. His size, his rim protection, his body of work from that game at least could be enough to get him some action in this contest against the Dons. Key number 2, we kind of already touched on it already. We're sticking with the front court. We're sticking with the kind of battle down on the block. Got to dominate the glass. Last time out, check and check. Gonzaga won the rebounding battle 41-28. Last time these two teams played each other, the Zags had 15 offensive rebounds in that game, just 8 for San Francisco, nearly doubled them up on second chance opportunities. The Dons are just not a good rebounding team. They average about just under 10 offensive rebounds per game. They average about 35 total rebounds per game. Those two metrics are 232nd in the country in offensive rebounds and 207th in the country in overall rebounds. Again, this team does not have a lot of size in the front court. They do not have a lot of physicality, and they're getting out-rebounded pretty consistently all season long. That is not a good thing for this team going up against a Gonzaga team that has a big front court, that has tenacious rebounders like Michael Ajayi, that has good rebounding guards. This is a problem for San Francisco and an area that Gonzaga needs to take advantage, because San Francisco is a very efficient offensive team. Very, very efficient. They're a good 2-point shooting and 3-point shooting team. If you give them second chance opportunities, they will make you pay. They will take advantage. They will get to the free throw line. They will hit open shots. They will make you pay for giving them opportunities. For Gonzaga, if you're going to be pounding the ball down low and you're going to be taking shots right at the rim, you got to be A, converting at a super high clip, which they did last time out, but B, gobble up those offensive boards. Give yourself second chance opportunities. Tip the ball back in, grab it, gather, go up again, see if you can get fouled and get to the line. If you need to, tap it back, let the guards try to get that ball and get another opportunity for you. If you can get second chance opportunities, if you can win the battle on the offensive glass 15-8 like last time, that's a huge recipe for success for this Gonzaga team in this road game against the Dons. Key number 3 for Gonzaga, shut down dribble penetration. The Zags did a very, very good job of this last time these two teams played in Spokane, particularly in the second half. Gonzaga limited starting point guard Marcus Williams, who's probably San Francisco's second best player. Malik Thomas is a potential frontrunner for WCC Player of the Year. He's been fantastic all year long. Those two guys are the best players for this USF team, but Gonzaga was really able to limit Marcus Williams' effectiveness in this game, basically by preventing him from getting any kind of dribble penetration. Williams had 8 assists in this game. All of them were in the first half. He did not record the San Francisco starting point guard, a very high ball dominant, high usage guard. Marcus Williams did not have a single assist in the second half of that game in Spokane. That was one of, if not the biggest factor for Gonzaga turning a tied game at halftime into a fairly comfortable 11-point victory. It was actually more comfortable than that until USF kind of came back towards the end. The reason Gonzaga built that big lead in the second half was by slowing down Marcus Williams. We will need to see Gonzaga do that again against Marcus Williams, against Malik Thomas. Stop those guys from getting downhill, prevent them from getting easy dribble penetration because they can break down even Gonzaga's improved defense that we've seen lately, where they are better at stopping penetration, where they are not as they don't go away from their defenders and leave them open for 3-point shots. Seeing Gonzaga be able to be more disciplined in that area has been a huge strength. But this team will still break you down if you let them get going downhill. If you let Thomas and Williams go towards the rim, they're either going to get fouled and get to the free throw line, which we'll talk about in a second, or they're going to be able to hit those little mid-range jump shots, or they're going to kick it out to shooters like Tyrone Riley or Robbie Beasley or Ryan Beasley coming off the bench, and they're going to be able to knock down open shots, and that's going to be a problem for Gonzaga. This is a big game if Emmanuel Nascente is healthy and able to play. If he's not, Dusty Stromer, big game for him. Those guys need to come in, play big minutes, and be tenacious at keeping Williams and Thomas in front of them. Make those guys shoot shots over you. If San Francisco beats you, or if they're hitting tough shots because they're making shots over outstretched defenders because they couldn't drive, you tip your hat. But that is the only acceptable way to get beat in this game. If you're letting them break down your defense because you can't keep them in front of you, that's a huge problem for Gonzaga. And we already teased it. Key number 4, avoid the unnecessary fouls. Gonzaga got into foul trouble against Santa Clara. Everybody got into foul trouble against Santa Clara. The officials really liked blowing the whistle in that game. Thankfully for Gonzaga, Ismail Diani was able to come in and save the day. That was what made that performance so impactful, was that he comes into the game when EK's already got a couple of fouls, when Braden Huff picked up his third foul 1 second into subbing into the basketball game, and Diani came in and was able to, he also picked up 3 fouls, but was able to stagger them a little bit, give Gonzaga a new look, and just impact that game in a way that we weren't really expecting him to do. But Gonzaga needs to avoid having key players in foul trouble in this contest. And San Francisco, they're not a great free throw shooting team. They're only just about 70.5% on the season, but they do get to the line a lot. They average 20.5 free throw attempts per game. That's 104th in the country. This is a team that gets to the line a lot, that, again, as a team, collectively not a great free throw shooting team, but the culprit is Malik Thomas. Again, second or third best player in the conference. Probably going to finish in that conversation for WCC Player of the Year. If he doesn't win it, he will be a first-teamer unquestionably. And while he has a multitude of skills, one of his most important skills is his ability to get to the free throw line and convert. Not quite Caleb Battle-esque in terms of percentage, but Thomas is averaging over 6 free throw attempts per game, and he's shooting 83.5% from the line. He is very, very good at using, he's a bigger guard, bigger for WCC standards at least. And if he can get a step on you, he can get into the rim and he can either draw contact on the guard still defending him, or he can get into bigs and force them to come down and commit a foul on him as well. The Zags have to avoid this. Ideally, the easiest way to avoid this is to limit the amount of times that they get any kind of dribble penetration, but it's going to happen. You're not going to prevent them from ever getting into the lane. So when that happens, we have to have Graham Ike and Braden Huff and Ben and Michael and Diani, if he's in the game, avoiding coming down on the fouls, picking up cheap fouls where Thomas can still convert and get an and one opportunity. Like, you have to prevent those types of situations from unraveling. Even if USF's not a great free throw shooting team, if Gonzaga's limited because of foul trouble, again, all 4 of these bigs scored in double figures last time. So if you accomplish key number 1, which is pounding the ball down low and effective, efficient performances from all of your bigs, then this key isn't as important, because next man up, whoever steps in, is just going to be able to get it done. But if you find yourself in a position late in the game where you can't turn to Braden or you can't turn to Graham, and you are a bit more limited in terms of who plays, maybe Diani comes in and plays another great game. I wouldn't be surprised. But you don't want to be forcing that. You don't want to need that to happen to pull off a win in this game. So avoiding the unnecessary fouls, not giving Thomas and Williams and those guys opportunities to score free points at the free throw line, not putting yourself in a position where you have to bench key players for large stretches of this game. That's going to be a critical part of winning this game as well. And then key number 5, It's been a key all season long. It's particularly a key against this team. Do not settle for bad outside shots. Do not settle for outside shots in general. I'm not saying you take 0 threes in this game, but honestly, if there was a team to take the fewest amount of three-pointers against, it's probably San Francisco. For the aforementioned reasons of they don't have a post presence, you should be able to dominate on the block. If your entire front court can shoot 65% from the field in this game, let them shoot 65% from the field. Pound them the basketball. Let them go to work every single possession. Because San Francisco is elite, and I mean that with a capital E, elite at shutting down opposing teams' three-point shooting. They are holding opponents on the year to 27.4% from three. Per KenPom, that is the second best three-point shooting defense in the country. Second best three-point shooting defense in the entire country belongs to the Dons of San Francisco. Going up against a Gonzaga team that is the worst three-point shooting Gonzaga team in the Mark Few era. The Zags are now officially below 35% from the three-point line as a team. That's pretty bad. I believe every other season in Mark Few's tenure, at least according to KenPom, has been over 36. I believe. If not, there's maybe 1 year that was between 35 and 36. But this year's team is below 35. This is not a good three-point shooting team. And they weren't a good three-point shooting team 2 weeks ago when they played Gonzaga, or when they played San Francisco. 4 of 14, 28.6%. What I liked about that was that they didn't take that many threes. 14 three-point attempts was a good number in that game because they pounded the ball down low. Like we said, the four bigs combined to shoot 65% on 34 attempts. Don't be forcing three-point shots up. USF, this is their strategy. They're going to come into this game and do everything they can to prevent the ball from getting down low. They're going to pack in the paint, try to stop Graham Ike from catching entry passes, double or triple teaming him when he does, and forcing Gonzaga to settle for outside shots. Do not fall victim to that. Obviously, if you have a wide open look, take it. Like, I'm not saying you have to skip every three-point opportunity, but the focal point offensively needs to not be settling for those outside shots, because this team is very good at preventing you from knocking them down. And this Gonzaga team, not particularly great at shooting them. That is an area that is a strength of USF's and a weakness of Gonzaga. So the best course of action for the Zags is to not be at all reliant on making that work in this contest. Well, folks, we now have a date and an official location for Gonzaga's fourth matchup against Kentucky. We're going to talk about that. Ticket sales in just over a week. We'll get you some information on that. Close out the show with some talk about the women's basketball team and the baseball team as well. All that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, life moves pretty fast, especially when you have a family. And one day you're watching your kids take their first steps, and before you know it, they're off to college. That's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get term life insurance that fits your family's needs. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online right from your couch. You can be covered in under 10 minutes, and in many cases, no health exam is required. As a parent, I want to make sure my family is financially protected no matter what happens. Fabric gives me that peace of mind. You can get $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day, so protecting your loved ones doesn't have to break the bank. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. That's meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Price subject to underwriting and health questions. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. We're closing out the show and the week by giving you an update on Gonzaga taking on Kentucky, the fourth game in a 6-year series agreed to between Mark Few and then Kentucky head coach John Calipari just before the 2022-23 college basketball season. Game number 4 in this series will take place on December 5th, 2025, Friday. It is at Bridgestone Arena in Nashville, Tennessee. The tip time for this game, as well as TV information, will be available at a later date. It's not something that we would expect to have down at this point. I would expect probably somewhere between 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. tip. Hopefully it'll get a major market for whether ESPN or CBS Sports or something like that, but we probably won't know that information for a few months from now. The Zags have played at Bridgestone Arena in Tennessee before. They played Tennessee there back in the 2016 season, beat them. I think it was 85-76 was the final score there. So they're 1-0 in their history at this arena, which is in Nashville, the home of NHL's Nashville Predators, also the home of the SEC men's basketball tournament as well. Tickets are going to go on sale for this game on March 7th. They'll be available on Ticketmaster and on the Bridgestone Arena website. And as we said before, this is the fourth game in a 6-year series agreed to by Few and Coach Cal before the 22-23 season. The first game took place in that 22-23 campaign. It was between Gonzaga and Kentucky at the Spokane Arena. Gonzaga won that game. Gonzaga then went to the Rupp Arena, the home of Kentucky and Lexington, in 23-24, won that game. That was that big-time game in February where the Zags desperately needed a quad one win, went out on the road and got one against an SEC team. And then this year, the first time playing Kentucky in the Mark Pope era, as he replaced John Calipari when he went to Arkansas. And unfortunately for Gonzaga, despite having a 16-point halftime lead that they elevated to 18 points early in the second half, Gonzaga blew that lead. The game went into overtime, and Kentucky was able to pull out a victory. That was at the Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle. So the series is 2-1 in favor of the Zags, with this game being kind of it was a pseudo home game for Gonzaga, a true home game for Kentucky, and then a neutral site that favored Gonzaga for game 3. And then now this will be a neutral site that favors Kentucky for game 4 in Nashville. And then in 26-27, the game will be back at Rupp Arena in Lexington. And then finally, in 2027-28, that is when this game will be at the McCarthy Athletic Center in Spokane. The Kennel has not hosted this game yet. It'll be hosted twice at the Rupp Arena before it is played at the Kennel. It is what it is. It is what it is. It's just that I think if Mark Pope had been the one agreeing to this schedule, he probably would have been a bit more willing to play Gonzaga at the Kennel, since he has not only played Gonzaga at the Kennel before, he has beaten them there before, whereas John Calipari is completely allergic to playing at small arenas, and so he was unwilling to do so. Regardless, December 5th, mark it in your calendars. Don't have a time yet, but expect it to be an evening game. Should be another very fun one. This Kentucky team is going to look very, very different, as they are littered this season with fifth-year graduate transfers and seniors. So they're going to have a very new look roster next season, but should be a very fun game between these two teams. They all have been up to this point. A couple other things here before we get you out and on your way with your weekend. The Lady Zags, I'm recording this at 1:30 on Thursday afternoon. So they're taking on Pacific tonight at 6 p.m. By the time you're listening to this, it's possible that game is already over. ESPN Plus, the Zags won 13 straight before a senior day loss to San Francisco. They're now 15-3 in the WCC, perfectly tied with the Portland Pilots. This is an important game for Gonzaga. Certainly at this point, all of them are important. If Gonzaga and Portland finish the regular season tied, Gonzaga has the tiebreaker. They swept Portland in the regular season. So all they have to do is keep pace with the Portland Pilots. Gonzaga's final 2 regular season games, again, at Pacific Thursday night and then at Santa Clara on Saturday night. They beat Santa Clara by 26 last time, so that should be a fairly comfortable win once again. The Pacific team, they only beat them by 4 at home last time out. 68-64 was the final there. Yvonne Ejim, 23 points, 12 boards for her. Allie Turner, 22 points, 6 of 7 from 3 in that game. The Zags were without starting power forward Maud Hybens in that game. She's expected to play Thursday night against the Tigers this time out. And again, like we said, Zags are tied with UP. UP's got at San Francisco Thursday night, and then they're closing at Pacific on Saturday night. So again, if both these teams win out, finish 17-3, the Zag women will be in first place in the WCC because they have that tiebreaker. But obviously, if they were to lose one of these 2 games and Portland were to win, then that would push them to second place. Either way, both these teams got to win that championship game in Vegas. Whoever wins it is going to be the team that goes dancing out of the WCC. It's looking like a one-bid league at this point. So for Gonzaga, not that these games don't matter, but that last game, that WCC championship game in Las Vegas, that's the game that matters the most in terms of making sure they're dancing once again this season. And then closing out the show quickly, Zag Baseball hosting BYU again. I'm recording this before the Thursday tip, which is at 3 p.m. Pacific time on Thursday. That is the home opener for Gonzaga Baseball. So if you got a chance, head out to Patterson Baseball Complex. Check them out Thursday at 3, Friday at 3, or Saturday at 1. The first 3 home games of the season for the Zags. BYU's 4-4 on the year. They split their opening series with Fresno State 2-2. They lost to UCLA, and then they took 2 out of 3 against Cal State Northridge to bring them up to 4-4 on the year. The Zags, meanwhile, 2-4 on the season. They went 1-2 in their opening series on the road against UC Davis. They also went 1-2 in their second series in Waco against the Baylor Bears. They lost the first two games in that Baylor series 4-0 and 5-2, but then won the Sunday game in 10 innings, 8-7. That's where we're at so far early in the Zag baseball season. It's going to wrap it up for me today here in the Locked On Zags podcast. Folks, thank you so much for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Special shout out to the everyday listeners. Folks, also make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube if you haven't done so yet so you get notified of every new episode as it comes out. Check out the written content at athlon.com. There's a link in your show notes on audio and video platform Talking Zags. 3 to 4 articles per day over there. Folks, thanks again for listening. Have a fantastic rest of your weekend. And as always, go Zags.